Bargo sat stoic in the courtroom.
You, Michael Shane Bargo, are sentenced to death.
He didn't even flinch when the judge sentenced him to death for the 2011 murder of 15-year-old Seth Jackson. Investigators say Bargo and 4 others lured Jackson to a home, beat him, shot him to death, burned and dismembered his body, then dumped the remains, all because of a dispute over a girl. The judge called it the most cold and calculated murder he's ever seen.
The death penalty is not only justified, it is the only appropriate sentence based on the evidence and the law of the state of Florida.
Seth Jackson's family decided not to go to court today. Bargo's grandmother broke down crying, and his family didn't want to talk as they left court. But his attorney pointed blame at Jackson, saying he was a violent person who made plenty of threats.
To burn their house down, to rape them, to shoot them.
Jurors didn't get to hear about that, and she believes it will be part of his automatic appeal to the state Supreme Court. She also feels Bargo's age should have spared his life. He was 18 at the time of the murder. But the judge didn't see it that way, and he agreed with the jurors that Michael Bargo deserves to die.
The defendant shall be taken by the proper authorities to the Florida State Prison and there be kept under close confinement until the date of his execution.
Bargo's attorney said they will gather up all the transcripts and the materials from the case and hand them over to the public defender's office. An attorney from that office will file the appeal with the state Supreme Court. Reporting from the Marion County Courthouse, Jeff Deal, Channel 9 Eyewitness News.
And Mike, Austin Myers had another shot today. He asked the judge to spare his life. Last week, a Warren County jury recommended death for the 19-year-old. But at the official sentencing this afternoon, Judge Oda heard from Myers as well as Justin Back's family.
Austin could have stopped it, but tells Justin it's okay, it's almost over. You could have changed your mind many times, but you didn't, especially when Justin was begging for his life.
An 18-year-old Navy recruit begged his friends to stop choking and stabbing him. Instead, they continued with the brutal murder.
I'm not going to stand up here and tell you how much I hate you. That is without question.
Today, Justin Back's parents didn't hold back as they spoke to Austin Myers, one of the teens who is now convicted of killing their son Justin.
I would just hope that every time you close your eyes at night, you see my son Justin.
Myers himself had a few words for the judge.
No, I've made a horrible mistake. I'm only 19 years old. I think there's a lot of good things I can do with my life if you allow me to keep my life.
Judge Don Oda upheld the jury's recommendation and sentenced Myers to death.
The defendant does not understand how precious life is.
After sentencing, prosecutor David Fornshell revealed more details about Myers' plan, one that Fornshell says included killing more people.
According to Tim Mosley, he said he wanted to go get his gun out of pawn in Dayton and use that gun as well as the one they stole from Mark Cates to go kill his own mom and stepdad. Austin Myers wanted to kill his own mom and stepdad after killing Justin Back. Just 15 minutes later, this is part of his plan.
Breaking news here, Steve, on MSNBC. Dylan Roof will get the death penalty. That is what these 12 jurors have unanimously decided today. Dylan Roof will get the death penalty for 18 of these 33 federal charges that he was convicted on just last month. Dylan Storm Roof, 22 years old, now becomes the first person in America to be given the death penalty in federal court for a hate crime, Steve. This marks the end of a very emotional, difficult, and historic trial here in Charleston, South Carolina. This jury comprised mostly of white women. They have decided that Dylan Roof will die by a lethal injection after having killed these 9 African-American church members at Emmanuel AME Church on June 17th, 2015, here in Charleston, South Carolina. The prosecution today, in their closing argument, they went through just vivid details of each of these victims we have come to know so well throughout this process, of what each of them saw saw in their last moments together in that church. They saw fear and they saw Dylann Roof. And he went through, the prosecutor, through the premeditation, the planning that Dylann Roof undertook in doing this, and then his final objective, to incite others to engage in a race war. I also want to explain to our audience, Steve, why the jury might have taken 3 hours almost to get to this conclusion. They had to go through what is called a verdict form, and that is a similar process than the one that was undertaken during the Boston Marathon bomber trial, during the Tsarnaev trial.
We begin tonight with the death sentence for a gang member who killed a high school football player because he carried a red backpack. The murder of Jamil Shaw shocked the community. Eyewitness News reporter Miriam Hernandez is live in downtown LA with the family's reaction to the judge's decision. Miriam?
From the night of the crime to the sentencing of the killer, it has been a 4-year ordeal for the Shaw family. Today was the wrenching finale. Already convicted of murder, Pedro Espinosa today heard directly from the family of Jamil Shaw II, the 17-year-old he gunned down.
The days when I was growing up, it was basically you use your fists. You don't just go and kill somebody cold blood. It's the coward's way out.
Jamil was a football standout who Espinosa shot thinking Jamil was a rival gang member. Before the judge pronounced the death penalty, the Shaw family told of their pain. After 4 years, still raw.
I find myself, I'm not that strong of a Christian because I can't turn around and say I forgive you for killing my son.
You should thank God if you have your family intact and your kids and you're loving them and you're doing things. Thank God for that, because there's people like that don't give a damn.
Espinosa, 23, an undocumented immigrant, had a history of gang crime and assaults even while behind bars. He shot Jamil Shaw a day after he had been released from jail. Today, in a last-ditch effort to avoid sentencing, Espinosa demanded a new trial, telling the judge his attorney was incompetent. The motion was denied. Instead, Judge Ronald Rose ordered execution.
At which time and place you shall then put to death Pedro Espinosa in the manner prescribed by law.
You know, you want revenge. You can't help it. It's like a human nature. That was my son that, you know, was on the streets dead. That was my son, and people don't understand that.
And the family has these words for Jamil.
We did it, man. We did all we could do. You know, can't do no more than that, man. You know? I tell him every day, sorry about that, man. Sorry, man.
CR 0333 for State of Texas versus Travis James Mullis. Special issue number 1, answer, we the jury unanimously find from the evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that the answer to special issue number 1 is yes. Signed by the foreperson of the jury. Special issue number 2, we the jury unanimously find that the answer to special issue number 2 is no. Signed by the foreperson of the jury. Will the jury return and open court the above answers to the special issues submitted to us, and the same is our verdict in this case, signed by the foreperson of the grand jury. Does either side desire to have the jury polled as to their answers to these special issues? We do not. Judgment of conviction by jury, capital murder. Date entered March 21st, 2011. Offense for which the defendant is convicted is capital murder. The jury has answered the special issues in a way that will result in the death penalty being imposed. Mr. Mullis is present with his attorney. And I'll ask the question of you at this time, Mr. Mullis. Do you know the legal reason why this judgment should not be signed and carried out this time? That is the order of the court to remand in custody of the sheriff to complete the sentence.
Brandon Lee Bradley, You have been given the opportunity to be heard and show cause why judgment should not be imposed and offer matters of mitigation. This court has considered the aggravating and mitigating circumstances presented and has prepared a comprehensive sentencing order which is on file with the clerk. No legal cause has been shown to preclude the imposition of the judgment and sentence. This case involves a completely senseless murder of a law enforcement officer who was simply fulfilling her duties as a public servant by initiating a traffic stop to investigate the O'Connell Lodge robbery as reported by its motel owner. Deputy Pill acted professionally with the defendant during the traffic stop and provided him countless opportunities to exit the vehicle over the course of 3 minutes. Never did Deputy Pill take her firearm out of its holster, draw her firearm, or threaten the defendant. The bottom line is that the defendant murdered Deputy Pill in a selfish, foolish, and futile attempt to avoid returning to prison for violating his probation. The defendant planned well in advance of the shooting of Deputy Pill that he would do what it took to avoid incarceration, even if this entailed using a gun to shoot an officer. Despite ample time for reflection to abandon his plan to avoid arrest, and even being urged by his then-girlfriend and trusted friend, Andrea Michelle Kirshner, not to shoot Deputy Pill, the defendant did so regardless. The defendant chose not to just shoot Deputy Pill one time, but fired off 7 more shots. The defendant's brazen, premeditated, callous, and cowardly action of shooting Deputy Pill multiple times on a public street in a neighborhood of congested single-family homes mandates nothing less than a death sentence. Therefore, Brandon Lee Bradley, as to count 1, you are judged guilty of the crime of first-degree murder for the unlawful killing of Deputy Barbara Pill. For this crime, the court sentences you to be put to death in the manner prescribed by law. As to count 2, you are judged guilty of the crime of robbery. For this crime, the court sentences you to serve a term of imprisonment in the Department of Corrections for the state of Florida for a term of 15 years. As to count 3, you are judged guilty of the crime of fleeing or attempting to elude a law enforcement officer, siren and lights activated with high speed or reckless driving. For this crime, the court sentences you to a term of imprisonment in the Department of Corrections for the state of Florida for a term of 15 years. As to count 4, you are judged guilty of the crime of resisting officer with violence. For this crime, the court sentences you to serve a term of imprisonment of 5 years in the Department of Corrections for the state of Florida. These sentences are to run consecutive with each other. The defendant is entitled for credit for time served of 844 days as calculated by the clerk. You are advised that this judgment and sentence shall automatically be appealed to the Supreme Court of the state of Florida. Defense counsel is directed to perfect the appeal. The public defender is hereby appointed to represent you on appeal. Should you not have private counsel or are unable to afford private counsel, you are hereby remanded and without bail to the custody of the sheriffs of the Brevard County to be delivered for commitment to the Department of Corrections, where you will be confined until final execution of this judgment and sentence prescribed by law. Mr. Bradley, may God have mercy upon your soul. This court is now in recess.